Okay, good afternoon, everyone. As mentioned before, this is Tamara Bush, and I'm here to present to you today our Smarter Balance State testing. As you know, this is our first year, and it's live, and so we're going to go over lots of information concerning what is expected and what is to come. Just to let you know, this is in listen-only mode, and you can be able to use the questions feature to write down any questions or type any questions in that space. Just also to let you know that there's going to be a few questions, some polls that we're going to put out there just to kind of get a feel as to what you're feeling about the Smarter Balance. And also to let you know that on the slides, some slides, there are page numbers that corresponds to the test administration manual, which we also have that located on our department website. So for today, our agenda, we're going to go over some basic overview information. We're going to also go over some testing roles, the test administration and security. We're also going to highlight some things of interim assessments that is provided by Smarter Balance, some general testing roles, scheduling, student accommodations, which is a huge piece that a lot of schools and staff that we've been receiving questions about, some important reminders, and some additional resources where I'm going to go into live so you can actually see resources that you have access to, and then have some time for some questions and answers if we have time at the end of this presentation. So basically, you might have heard of the WCAP, or we call it the WCAP, which stands for the Washington Comprehensive Assessment Program. And so basically, as you know, as we shifted from the former WASL to where we are now, this is what all the state assessments fall under this huge umbrella. And as you can see, it's divided into different state assessments that is offered to students: MSP, HISP, the EOC, the DAPE, which now is called the off-grade level at the high school level. We also have the WAAIM, which is the new portfolio, which is done online for students that qualify to use this assessment. We also have the WELPA for ELL students, and then we have WA-KIDS, which is an observational piece for our kindergartners. And then we have the Smarter Balance. And as you can see by the diagram, it's broken into various different aspects of it. And so in this case, we have summative, which is what students are going to be assessed on. And then we have the interims, which is available, and we'll discuss a little later about that. And then we also have the digital library, which we found out many instructors or teachers are using this resource as well. And as you can see with some of the acronyms that is highlighted like in an orange, eventually those state assessments are going to be phased out over time, and then we're going to be working with Smarter Balance. So OSPI has now joined forces with the American Institutes for Research, which is AIR, not AIR. And so this is the new vendor that we're going to be working with for Smarter Balance from here on out. And you might have heard many times that the Smarter Balance is a state-led consortium where various states have worked together to develop next-generation assessments that are aligned to the Common Core state standards. And so students are going to be assessed with the English Language Arts, or ELA literacy, and mathematics. And now with the ELA, one of the huge components specifically at the elementary level is that now students are going to be test across all grade levels, and also middle school with grade 8. So this is a huge component for schools, knowing that in the past it was grades 4, 7, and high school at grade 10. And also with science assessments, we're still going to be using the same current state assessments that we have currently. So MSP for elementary middle schools and EOC for high schools. And so until the state comes together and they have the current state assessments for science, then we'll be using that with the Smarter Balance feature. And so within the actual test for Smarter Balance, you might have heard many times there's going to be a computer adaptive test, or the CAT, and a performance task, or the PT. And as you know, we have more acronyms thrown out there within our educational field. And so the CAT is an individually tailored set of items that students will receive that provides more accuracy in their scores as they take this test. And so based on their responses, the computer program is going to select the difficulty of the questions that the students are going to receive. So for example, the student receives a math question and they answer the question correctly. Depending on how they answer the question, then the computer program is going to select the question that's going to be higher in difficulty, and the same in reverse will occur. If a student has a question and they answer the question incorrectly, then the computer is going to pick a question that's going to be a lower in difficulty. So this is a good feature in the fact that students will be able to, you'll be able to see the full range of their achievement with this new system. And then we have the PT, which provides the opportunity for students to show their ability, and they can apply this knowledge that they have so that they can explore and analyze complex real-life world scenarios. So now we're going to take a look on the testing roles and responsibilities at our level, the district, and as well as for schools. So we have the district coordinator, which is my supervisor, Travis Schulhauser, but under his direction I'm managing state testing for the district. And so basically the DC manages and oversees all test administration activities and will need to be informed of anything that does occur. So we're providing training for you right now, and then in turn we'll have training materials for for proctors so that you can have that to train your staff, and we're going to put that on our department website. And so also we monitor state testing, and we just respond to any and everything that is needed during the test administration window. And then we have the school testing coordinator, or the SC. And so basically their role is similar to the DC, where they manage everything and oversee it at the school level. And so they are to report to the DC with any security issues that may occur during the testing. And so you'll hear this many times from me that we just want to make sure if you have any questions or anything that you need help with, just contact our office and we'll be able to assist you. Then we have the test administrator, or the TA. And so basically OSPI does recommend that the TA, which they're the ones to administer the Smarter Balance assessments, and in this case will be the teachers. And I know that at various schools, specifically at the elementary level, they'll have a way in terms of what will work best for them in terms of who would actually fill in that role. So depending if they have coaches and or any other support staff that can assist teachers with this task. But it is designed that the test administrator, which they will be the ones helping to administer the test for students during the test administration process. So now we're going to go over test administration and security. We're going to overview things about the test environment and preparing students. So for student enrollment, as you are aware, that it's in grades 3 through 8 and grades 11. And these students are required to participate in both ELA and math for state, federal, and accountability purposes. But there are some exceptions. And so with that exceptions, that includes students that are receiving special education services. So these are kids that have the most significant cognitive disabilities, and these students are assessed with the Washington Access to Instruction and Measurement, another wonderful acronym known as WAAIM. And so, as mentioned before, this is done on the computer, so it's about 1% or lower in our student population for our district. And then we have students that are receiving English language services. And so these students are ELLs that if they have enrolled in the last 12 months prior to testing in a U.S. public school, they do have a one-time exemption for the ELA. But these students must participate in the math assessment. And in some cases, we have some parents and students alike that they refuse to participate in testing. So we just kindly request that if a parent is not wanting their child to test, that a letter is addressed to the principal and you forward a copy to me, Tamara Bush, in the central office, so that we can have that for our district and departmental documentation. So now we're going to go over some aspects of the TIDE, and you should have received a login. So for school administrators or designated school administrators at the secondary levels, as well as the teachers should have received a TA login. So this is where it's role specific, and this is where you manage users and students within the system. So you should have received that information. If you have not, just please contact me, and then I could be able to make sure that you're in the system and that we can help you get that information to you. So when you do receive it, this is basically the login screen that you receive. and then this is the main screen that you will see. Now there might be some icons that's probably more or less at the district level. Of course, we have a lot more access, but this is basically what the login would look like, the main screen will look like when you log into the system. So within TIDE, we just want to make sure that students are correctly assigned to their schools. And so from our system, PowerSchool, to CEDARS, and then that's submitted to OSPI, all students will be pre-ID'd with their student information, and that will include the demographics, so that'll be their name, their gender, birth date, their sex, free and reduced lunch, and things like that will be uploaded into the system. In order for a student to be able to access a test, we just need to make sure that everything is correct prior to testing. Now, if there's any discrepancies, just let us know, and then we can work with you to kind of iron things out. But we'll work with you hand in hand just to make sure that everything runs smoothly and make sure everything is okay during and before testing. So now we're going to kind of highlight about student login and preparation. So before we actually get started, I'm going to have a poll, and I would like for you to take just a minute to see how many times that you may have used the practice test. So I'm just going to let this run for about a minute, so just take the time to vote. Okay, we see that there are a lot of individuals that did respond, so I'm going to share the results. So you can see that a good amount of you at least had students participate with the practice and training tests at least 1 to 2 times. So that's super awesome. Good job on that note. So when students are accessing the Smarter Balance test, they need to access this with a test session ticket. And so as you can see on the screen, the right-hand side, they will enter their first name, they will enter their state student number, and then they will have a generated session ID. We do have instructions to generate test session tickets, and also we are working on getting the instructions to create a session ID. So we're hoping to have that by the end of this week, which will be tomorrow, so that you can be able to access that information, and it will be located on our assessment department website. So we're going to take a few moments to talk about the test security before, during, and after testing. And so before students begin testing, it's important that there's the removal or cover of any information on classroom walls. So this may contain, literary definitions, maps, or any type of formulas that might be on the walls. We want to ensure that for the seating arrangement that there's adequate spacing between students, and I know for some school sites at the elementary level sometimes that can be challenging, but we just want to make sure that the students have the spacing between, so that will minimize students looking at each other's work. And I cannot stress enough that it's very important that at your school site that it's communicated as to when the testing windows are, and then also to have signs up and around as to where students will be tested. So do not disturb sign, and we have that on our department website as well too. Place it on the testing door. You can place them in the hall so that if you have to reroute traffic or however you need to do so that everyone in your school building knows that testing is occurring. So during testing, as you're probably well aware, that we need to make sure that it's a quiet environment, so just limit as much noise as possible for students, and also to kind of communicate or work with janitorial staff just to make sure that there's no noise going on the outside of the building that could cause distractions for students during testing. It's important that students are actively supervised during testing, so they should not have any type of electronic devices. And so we just need to make sure that students put that away, backpacks to the side of the room, and just make sure that we don't have anything that will penalize the student in any way. So access to allowable resources, we'll talk about that in the later portion of this presentation. Viewing of assessment items, so only students should be looking at their questions and responses. Students that are not testing or unauthorized staff should not be in the same room with students where they're testing or anything that's going on with that. So if you have volunteers, they are not allowed to be with the students. They can help with supervision of bathroom breaks and things of that nature, or breaks in general. And then having TAs and the other trained staff should not actively view or analyze test items, but there's going to be some circumstances around that the teachers are able to do so for students that may have accommodations, which we'll discuss at a later point in this presentation. So no answer key development, just making sure that there's no answer keys that are being developed for test items, and no copying, no discussing or reviewing of the test materials. So we just want to make sure that test security is basically standard and it's high, and it must be followed at all times until your school building window is totally complete and students are done testing. So after testing, we just want to make sure that no test materials, they're used for instructions. So that is includes and not limited to test items, stimuli, reading passages, and writing prompts. And so when students are done testing, so if they have scratch paper for the ELA and or math, just make sure that everything is collected and that it's discarded or securely shredded at the end of the day, so that we don't have anything lingering around for any other student that might have access to that if they are on a different scheduled testing window for students that may have tested prior before them. So we're going to go over some testing improprieties, irregularities, and breaches. And so we have 3 different levels in regards to testing as a whole. So impropriety is the lowest action, so it has little to no risk on test security and validity. So in this case, an example of this could be if a student may have did not hear the teacher with their directions, and they kind of lean over to their classmate and say, hey, what did so-and-so say? And the teacher kind of catch them in discussion. That's a low risk security due to the fact that the student was not paying attention. So we just want to make sure that at the local level that you correct that. Just please, if you have a question, just raise your hand. If you have any questions, you can contact us and we can work with you through the situation. Then we have the next, which is the irregularity, and so that may have a potential risk on test security and validity. And so an example of that would probably be if a student was maybe actively caught cheating, passing a note, and it might have had an answer to the question, what have you. And once again, you can correct that, let the student, rule of thumb, we would like the student to continue testing, but then we just want to make sure that you just let our office know of anything depending on the severity of cheating, if that is the case. Then we have the last, which is the highest action or the high risk of test security and validity, and that's a breach. So in that case, an example of that is, say, for instance, if a teacher might have created a test item for students or use it for instruction, then that you will need to let us know ASAP, and then we will have to work with OSPI, which in turn they may have to work with the testing vendor just to figure things out and so forth. But when in doubt, you just need to let us know, and just let us figure things out together so we can be able to correct and resolve the situation as soon as we can. Next, we have appeals, and there are 4 types of appeals that are in the system. And so we have reset. So basically, this would allow a student's test to be removed and removed from the system, and then we can reset the system to a new test. And so there's our circumstances that will come up where this action may need to be done, and so once again, we'll just work with you as needed. Then we have invalidation. And so with this, we will actually invalidate a student's test, so it eliminates the test and the test will not be scored. And so once again, rule of thumb, we would like students to have the benefit of the doubt, but depending on the circumstance, then we will work with you to see whether or not if that's grounds for invalidating a student's test. And then next we have reopen. And so basically with reopening a test, one major example would be is that if a student unexpectedly became sick, or for instance if we had a horrible snow day like what's going on back east and students can't get back to the test within the time allotted. So for the CAT, students have 45 days from when they log into the system. So when they log into Smarter Balance, whichever content area, the clock starts ticking. And so they have 45 days from when they go into the log into the system to complete the test. And for the PT, the students have 10 days from when they log into the system to start the test to have it completed. So depending on the student's circumstance, once again, we will work with you to see if this is grounds that we can reopen the test so the student can complete testing. And then the last appeal that we have is restore. And so basically restore a test when it's from reset, so it will restore it back to its prior status. And once again, if we're in a circumstance with a student with that, we will work with you to get the students where they need to be. So now we're going to take a few moments to discuss about interims, and this part of the presentation is basically like scratching the surface regarding interim assessments, and so we can give that, have that out for you. So the basic design for the interim assessments is that it's administered through the same system as the summative or the Smarter Balance that students are going to be taking for ELA and math. And so the items are drawn from the same pool as summative, so there's a full array of different types of item types that students can be assessed on. It can be administered at any time of the school year, but it's at the teacher's discretion. And we just want to point out there that this is at the teacher level. It's optional, so if a teacher wants to jump in and do that, they're more than welcome to do so. We're not mandating it that they have to. Teachers can be able to use it at their own leisure. It's online, but it's not adaptive. And so starting for next school year, that piece will come into play so that teachers can have that adaptive piece. And then also students that have accommodations, the accommodation guidelines are the same as if it was a summative assessment that students can be able to have access to. But just keep in mind this is not intended for accountability decisions. So this next slide is kind of give you a schematic as to the interim assessments, and there's two different aspects of that for flexibility to be used. So we have the interim comprehensive assessment, or the ICA, and then we have the interim assessment blocks, or the IAB. And so I have the next few slides are more detailed, and so I'm not going to get into too much details with it, but I will just kind of go through the slides slowly so you have an idea as to seeing what consists on this slide. So this one is just showing the IABs, or the interim assessment blocks, that the current thinking that students, information that is covered for students for this. And then we have the IABs for math, and so this is for elementary and middle school. And then we have the IABs, and this is at the high school level for math. And so within the system, there is a teacher hand scoring system. And so basically, constructive responses or written responses are hand scored by the teachers. And so then an overall score will be given once the teacher is done scoring that part. There are some exemplars that are given, and also their training guides. And do note that the administration times, they vary by the grade level and by block. So you have non-PT block, it requires about an hour, and then you have the PT block, which requires up to 2 hours. And once again, just to reiterate, this is optional, so teachers can be able to use this resource if they want to, if they choose to, but it does provide feedback to assist teachers with their students. And I know in previous training sessions I got the question in regards to, so what about with Amplify? And we know many schools have been using Amplify elementary and secondary levels. And so just to let you know that prior to the interims for Smarter Balance, we weren't sure as to when they would be released or if they would be released. And so the powers that be had decided that we were going to use Amplify as a system to kind of give some instantaneous feedback for teachers, and we've had some really positive results, feedback from the field as to using that, especially teachers using Journeys and Engage New York, and it's filling in some cracks and crevices that those two pieces are not giving them to be able to assist with their students. And there's also the reporting piece, and so for the ICA, the reporting is going to be the same as a summative assessment, so you'll have an overall scale score, and then they'll have achievement levels as well as claim level information. And then for the IABs, you have it's at the claim level information, but for at the item level, there's nothing as of right now, but that's something that will come in the future. When, I'm not sure, but we will keep you posted in regards to that piece. So we're going to go over some general testing rules. So the basic test rules that we have with the CAT and the PT, they'll be shown as two separate tests. So when and if a student does log in, whether or not they test, so in this case if they just logged in, automatically the student is going to count as tested. So if a student logs in and does not test, the student will be assigned the lowest achievement level. So keep that in mind as to with the students that you're working with your scheduling and figuring things out with students and testing. So there are going to be possible segments within the test. So as an example, let's say at the high school level, you have a segment that has an embedded calculator that's available for students to use during a test. Then you have another segment where the calculator is not available for use. So just kind of keep in mind, hopefully that seeing that many people have used the practice and training test, that is a guide working with students as to what they will expect when they will take the live assessment. So for student responses and test completion, students must provide an answer for all items that is located on the test page. And in order for them to move on, they need to make sure that they answer all the questions that is on the page for them to answer. Some questions you might have multiple items, and so students may need to use the vertical scroll bar that will be on the side of the screen. So just remind students, especially elementary level, to remind them, hey, make sure that you use the vertical scroll bar because you want to make sure that you read everything and see everything that's on the screen. Once a student is done testing, so they complete and they submit it for scoring, they're not able to go back to enter the test. They can mark items, they can review items during the test, and they can review prior to submitting, but as long as they don't press end test, then they'll be fine. But once they do, they cannot go back into the system to make any changes. Next, we have pause rules. So for the CAT portion of the test, the students will, in order for them to actually access the test, as mentioned before in previous slides, they'll have their first name, they'll have their ID, which will be on their session ticket, and they also will have a session ID that will be generated by the TA, and it also can be generated by the school coordinator or the SC. So students can be able to return to the page the test items that they had last paused on. So it will be on the same page that if they have multiple questions on a page and one was left unanswered, they can be able to go back to that page. But if they answered all the questions on the page, then they will automatically be sent to the next page for them to complete their test. Once they have that pause, they use that pause function, they're not able to review or change anything that they have answered previously, even if they have anything that was marked for review. And then also you have highlighted text and global notes, those will be lost. And if there's any technical issues, so like say if there was a power outage of some sort, which we hope does not happen, students will be automatically logged out of the system and a test will pause automatically, and all the pause rules as mentioned before will apply. So for the PT portion of the test, there are no pause restrictions, and so the global notes that students will have from the first to the second session, they can actually be able to see the global notes in the second session that they may have used in their first section of the test. And once again, if there's any technical issues, students will automatically be logged out, and then the test pause rules does apply for that as well. So next we have test expiration, and I kind of highlighted that earlier. So when students are in a CAT, they have 45 days from when they log into the test to finish the test. And so the recommendation is that we want students to be able, or OSPI would like students to be able to complete within 5 days. And if the student is in the PT, they have 10 days, and it's recommended that they do complete that within 3 days of the test. So now we're going to go to sequencing and scheduling. So I know that many of you might have seen this chart multiple times, and so basically this is an overview schematic as to the estimated working times by grade bands. So you're looking at the elementary, middle, and high school and how much time it will take for a student to take the test. And once again, as mentioned before, this is estimated, but just keep in mind with the 30-minute classroom activity, that's what it's designed for, but there's a possibility that you might go past a 30-minute, or teachers may go past a 30-minute window, which is totally fine, but just keep in mind the classroom activity comes prior to the performance task. That's a very key component, classroom activity before the PT. And so this is just the schematic showing for ELA. And one piece that we had questions on was about with the ELA, should the PT occur on the same day? So we contacted OSPI, and they said that it's a recommendation, but schools can test on the same day if they opt to do so. So you can have the classroom activity and do the PT right thereafter. That is fine. That's at the discretion of the school. So for the assessment sequence for math, as you can see, similar to ELA. And for the order of test administration, I had put this on our department website. There was an error in regards to the order of the test administration. This is a recommendation. So say, for instance, if a school wants to do the performance task prior to the CAT, that's fine, but always keep in mind the classroom activity comes before the performance task. So you can do the CAT, the classroom activity performance task, or it can be the classroom activity with the performance task, and the CAT can come later. So you have that flexibility depending on how you would like to do it at your school site. So now we're going to take a few moments to go over student accommodations. So one of the biggest things that we wanted to stress is that please work with your ELD and special education building staff concerning the coding of students. We cannot stress very strongly in regards to that piece. It's important that the designated testing coordinator, school administrators are working together so that we can just make sure that the students have those accommodations in the system. And so these are testing features that are in the system that are digitally within or embedded, and then you have things that are separate or non-embedded from the system. So we have a 3-layer. You have universal tools that are available to all students. Then we have designated supports that are available to students that have an IEP 504 plan and or ELL designation, but also you may have some kids that might be able to access those designated supports as well too. And then we have accommodations, which are available to students with IEP or 504 plan designation. And as you can see with the resource, this presentation is hyperlinked to the guidelines for the tool supports and accommodations that you can be able to print off, or if you're tech savvy, you can have it on your computer to be able to use as a resource. So this next slide just gives a visual schematic as to some of the, or many of the tools that are available for students. So as you can see for universal tools, one of the major ones are breaks. So students can have a break as needed, whether if it's scheduled or whether if it's, student has to go, then, allow them to do so. And let's see, then like for designated supports, text-to-speech, which we'll talk about in a later slide. And then you have in the accommodations piece, students that are ASL, Braille, closed captioning. So there's an array of different types of accommodations for students. And like I said once before, it's very important that you work with your building staff that serve these students so that they can be able to have the better supports that they need during the test administration. So one of the key components that our office is going to do is that we're going to send a pre-AD student information to designated testing coordinators and the school admins. Secondary level is usually the PAs, and at the high school is the APs. We will send that information to you, and actually it was completed today, so we're going to have that sent out to you tomorrow. And so what it is going to be a file that has the students in your school by grade level that have in PowerSchool, they have an ELL designation, or if they are a special ed designation as well too. And so basically there are columns of different accommodations, and then you would just click the drop-down menu as to if John Smith is ELL and may need a Russian glossary translation for certain items, then you will select that for the student. And we'll also have a code sheet that goes along that explains what is what, so that you can be able to do that. If there's any students on that list that are missing, you can go ahead and type that student's name in and then have the drop-down menu for that student for that accommodation. So our office is going to batch load, just front load all that information for you, for students, into the TIDE system. So prior to testing, when a student sits down on the computer, they will have that accommodation as needed for them for testing. Now thereafter, after we are done batch uploading student information, if you have 1 or 2 kids trickling in, that's going to be the school's responsibility to add the remaining incoming students. And so basically you're going to have to go into the student's demographic page and you're going to select the accommodation that the students are going to need. And we're also going to have step-by-step instructions as to how to do that as well too. So we're doing a lot of footwork on our part so that we can be able to make it as easy as possible, knowing that you have a lot on your plate and trying to get all the planning done for students and testing. Just to let you know that we're going to start with 3rd grade first, because 3rd grade is going to be starting on March 10th, and we do have a few schools at the elementary level that are starting on that date. So we're going to work with those schools first, and then thereafter we're going to get our elementary, our middle, and our high schools and get everything done for you, and as quick as possible as well too. So text-to-speech. So with the text-to-speech, it's a read-aloud feature that is embedded into the technology, the system, in a test engine system, and student is able to control the speed, raise and lower the volume through the voice control, the voice that is reading to the students for what they're needing. And so for the math and science, you have the stimuli and items, and then for ELA, there are ELA items. And so these are for students that are struggling, they're struggling readers and they may need assistance with all or portions of the test. And so we've gotten a lot of questions from ELD specifically in regards to students that they feel that are struggling readers. And so the rule of thumb, well, I won't say the rule of thumb, but in thinking it through, we look at it this way. These teachers work with their students and know their students well. Now, using the practice and training test, if they feel that the student can benefit by using this as a resource, then they can be able to do so. Now, you do have students that have an IEP for this, and by all means, have them use it. We do have students that have reading-related disabilities, or students that are blind that do not have adequate Braille skills. This might be a resource for them as well too. But also keep in mind, we do also have the human reader is also an option as well too for a majority of students as well. If you have further questions in regards to that, just let me know and I can work with you. Then we have the ELA reading passages only. So basically with these group of students, and these students must have an IEP or 504 plan to use this designation, it's available for students in grade 6 and higher. So they will have the items and the whole passages read to them for the test. So next we have print on demand. And so basically this is printing of test items or the stimuli and passages for students that may need this accommodation. So this is on individual need, and a student should have a documentation in an IEP or 504 plan. So this is due to the fact the student cannot be able to access test materials online. An example of this is photosensitive epilepsy. We already had a student that will be using this as an option for testing due to their circumstance. They cannot do anything on online feature. But just keep in mind, this is not to be assigned due to a student's preference. This accommodation is only for students that have an IEP or 504 plan that cannot access materials online. If you have any questions, just let me know and then we'll work with you through that process. So with our next, we're going to go into allowable resources and reminders. So with your allowable resources, one of the major things we have are calculators, which are embedded in the system. And then you have math tools, which in this case, we just pulled out different examples that are allowable. And there's a whole list of different things within the test administration manual. Scratch paper. So for ELA, students can be able to use that for note-taking, which is very crucial. I know at the elementary levels, a lot of teachers, what they're doing is having students just write out their responses and then they type it into the system. Then we have math, which is required for all grade levels. And then for math, they have graph paper that is required for students for grade 6 and above. So schools are to provide this resource for students so that they can be able to have during testing, so that they can have it at their fingertips. Then also we have the multiplication table, which is a non-embedded single-digit multiplication table for grades 4 and above. And for Smarter Balance, it's noted that it's used for students with a documented and persistent calculation disability. So in this case, dyscalculia. And this can be printed for students for this accommodation, and we'll have it up on our department website as well. So we just wanted to mention to you with some little reminders. And so for starters, we just wanted to kind of put out there for submitting testing schedules. So we have another quick poll just to see as to how many of you had submitted your testing schedule. So we'll put this up for about a minute, and so if you can just vote, it would be very much appreciated. Okay, we have some pretty good responses, so we'll share the results. So a good amount of you have turned them in, and there's a few of you that's still working on there, and that's fine, and there's some of you who have not, which is okay too. But just let us know how we can be able to help you through this process as well. So once again, to stress again, it's critical to communicate with your building staff, and so ELD, special education staff, and your building at large, just to let them know what is expected of them and what is to come. No blockout dates. So I wrangled OSPI and asked that question as to, are there going to be any blockout dates? Because during the field test, there were a few, and there were some we did not know of. And so when schools were testing and students were testing, they couldn't get into the system, and then lo and behold, we found out, oops, they were doing updates while students were testing. That wasn't fun. So we had found out that they will, if they have any updates, it's going to be during the weekend. So that's good to know. And if by possibility or chance, if it does happen, we'll try to get something out to schools ASAP. But I was just making sure, rest assured, that there will be no updates during the actual live testing of the Smarter Balance. So contacting OSPI. If you contact them, they'll send you back to our office. So if you have any questions, just let us know and we'll assist you as needed. For AIR, the help desk, if you have any questions, you can contact them. However, if you have any questions concerning your login to Tide, please contact me or even contact Lonnie first before you contact them, because if you're not, for instance, there might have been some people that might have been overlooked, because we try to pull all the information from PowerSchool and to get teachers and everyone to get a login information, and there might have been a few people that might have been overlooked if they're subs or things of that nature depending on their role. Let us know first, and then we can be able to add and try to troubleshoot locally before we go to AIR. But if you have any other questions that you need answers to, that's fine. You can contact them. I do recommend to call. It's a lot quicker than emailing, the experience that I've had, and so I would say just give them a call, put them on speed dial, and then you can be able to get your questions answered. So just want to let you know, keep calm and remember to breathe. I know that with testing, it gets very hectic and there's lots of things that are going on and activities and so forth, but we are in this together and we're here to help you through this process. So now we're going to take a few moments to actually look at additional resources, and I'm going to go live so you can get a view as to what is going on. So now I'm going to go into the WCAP. And so basically this is the Washington Comprehensive Assessment Program. And so there are much resources that you can have. There are students and families, and that's still coming soon, so I don't know when that's actually going to be released, to be honest with you, but I have heard that it's coming in within a week or two, so you might want to check that out and then be able to have this possibly on your school website so parents can be able to access this information. So if you go into the test administrators, as you can see, there are various different icons. So here's your training test administration, that if you want to have an idea as to what it would be live, I would recommend to use that so students can be able to use username and passwords to get into the system to kind of have that feel, that mock, live test feel. Then we have test administration resources in here. So basically they're user guides and manuals and modules and things at your fingertips. Here, this is where you would access the TIDE, and so I would recommend that once you go on here to bookmark this, and then you can be able to have that at your fingertips as needed. Then we have the test administration, and this is where the actual live test administration would occur, and also for interims as well too. This is where you're able to access that as well, and we'll have instructions step by step how to access this information. Here, this is where teachers would use this as for scoring students' tests for the interims, and we're having information for the interim assessments as well too. Then here is the online reporting system, and that's where teachers and district level individuals can be able to go in here and look at student scores once everything is scored. And just to let you know that once a student is done testing, scores are to be returned within 3 weeks. And so we had asked OSPI in regards to if it's at the school level, the district level, but the response that I received and how I interpreted it was that once a student is done testing, then they will get their scores back in 3 weeks' time. So I'm going to have to do a little bit more digging and clarification with that, and then we'll put something out for everyone so you can have accuracy in regards to that. Then we have the digital library, which is a huge resource for teachers to be able to use. So it's a good platform or forum of many teachers, educators across the U.S. that they put different resources in there so that you have that at your fingertips. And then we have the interim classroom activities, which will be used for the interim assessments. So this is another way that if, once again, if teachers want to be able to use the interims, that's at the discretion that they can use as needed. So the next thing that we're going to go into would be our department webpage. And so as mentioned before, we go to staff, and then we go to, if I can get this, we get to staff and then departments. And then we go to assessment and program effectiveness. And then we'll go to the SBAC in district only. And since I had already logged in, I bypassed having to enter in my web information because I had it up and running. And so as you can see, there will be announcements if there's anything new that we want everyone to know. So the most recent was on yesterday in regards to the order of the presentation for SBAC. Let you know that there are instructions for printing student test tickets. And there's a new resource that we received from special programs regarding special education accommodations quick reference, so you have that. And then what we'll also have is we'll have a link for archive posts. So if you feel like, oh my goodness, I might have overlooked something or forgot something, we'll have an archive post by month. So you can be able to access that and kind of look back on anything that you think you might have missed. Then we'll have the WCAP portal that what I've showed you before. It's a link here, so you might want to bookmark that. Then you have information for manuals and instructions, training resources. We're working on the proctored training, so we'll get that out to you. Roles and responsibilities. FAQ, so any questions that were asked during the trainings, we're going to gather everything up, put that on there so everyone has the same information. Interim assessments, that is soon to be coming. And then all your security forms and any other additional resources that is there at your fingertips. And so we're also thinking about having an updated weekly FAQ, so that if there's any new questions that we receive from the field, we'll put that on the department website, so you'll have access to that as well too. So we are basically at the end of our presentation, and so I'm going to mute for about a couple minutes to see if there's any questions that are out there that we will answer, and then we'll just go from there. So I'm going to mute for a little bit, and then we will answer the questions that may come out. Okay, so there were a few questions that popped up, and so we got one question about the uploading of student information accommodations. And so the question that was asked was, will that upload by the schools be necessary for in-district transfers or only students new to the district? And so this will be for students that are new to the district, because with the in-district transfers, they would have that information in there already. And so any new students that you may need to add to the system, you're going to need to put in their accommodations as needed. So we have a question concerning the text-to-speech option about struggling readers without an IEP. And so basically the verbiage with that is that students that are struggling readers that might need assistance to access the assessment by having all or portions of the assessment read to them, they can be able to access that. But just keep in mind is that since this support could be confusing to students that do not regularly receive this support, that's where you come in by using the practice and training test to see if this is something that students should be able to use. Now, you have students that regularly use it, so that may not be a problem, but because this is a new way of offering accommodations for kids, it is a little confusing. So if you still have further questions with that, just let me know, and then I can work with you in regards to that question. So next question is, how do TAs or SCs get session ID and student ID set up to take an interim assessment? And once again, we will have information as to how to do that. So to be able to generate a session ID so students can be able to take the interim assessment. We do have instructions as to how to create session tickets for students to access, so that is already on our website, but we're just trying to finish up the last minute pieces for generating a session ID. And reason being is that we tend to like to do it step by step so it's foolproof, and so we just wanted to make sure that we have step by step so that you can be able to do it on your own to get that to you. So we're hoping to get that to you as soon as we can. Do we train third grade first before rest of staff? Now for training, it is up to the school how you would like to train your staff. Most schools tend to do it all together. So at elementary level, they tend to do a collaboration is when they would like to do it, unless if they do it after school as a PD. So that's going to be at the discretion of the school administrator as to how you would like to do it. Oh, you're welcome. Someone said no question, but thank you. You're welcome. Let's see. Next question. I saw the embedded calculator on some questions. If the question doesn't have the calculator, does that mean they can't use it? do we need to provide calculators? That's when we're talking about the segments. So there are going to be some pieces where there are going to be an embedded calculator in the system, and there are going to be some that are not going to have embedded calculators in the system. And when calculators are not used, that's when students are not to use the calculators. Now, what we can do is we can contact OSBI to have more clarification and specifics around that question, and so we can get that out to you so everyone will have access to that same question and answer. Now, can substitutes be trained to proctor? So with substitutes, if you have a substitute that is certificated, then I would say yes, because of the mere fact of making sure that they're following the guidelines. Like, for instance, you may have interns that will be in your school site, and they, since they're contracted under the district, they can be able to help you as well. So substitutes, if you do have teacher substitutes, they can be trained to proctor. More hands on deck is really helpful, knowing that you want to make sure that everything runs smoothly as possible. In some ways, it would be nice that there were many of us, myself and my colleague Lonnie, that we were cloned, that we can come out to your school site to be able to help you, but we're not able to do so. But if you have more hands on deck and you can be able to train them, that's very much an okay to be able to do so. Is there a difference between practice test and training test? If so, can you clarify the difference and how to access each, please? Yes, there is a difference between the two. I don't have my notes with me in regards to that, but I can get that out to you. We do have information specifically as to what is what. I do know that one is grade specific and the other one is general of various different questions from different grade levels, but I'm not sure which one is which, but we can get that out to you. That's not a problem. Do you use test session tickets for training tests? Actually, for the interims you can, but for the training test, I'm going to have to follow up on that one, because I think it might just say guest, but we would have to follow up with you, or everyone I should say, on that question. So I apologize for not having a direct answer for that one. Are interim scores tracked by state and used for accountability measures? No, the interim scores are not used as if it would be used for summative assessments. Summative assessments are the ones that are going to be tracked and be used for accountability, but interims are not. Interims are basically just used to help guide teachers as to where their students are at. And so kind of think about it on the lines of Amplify, where we're just using that system to be able to see where students are at in terms of Common Core and whichever content area that you are assessing students, so that you can be able to use that information to better guide students and instruction. The teacher can help their students. Will the test be adaptive? So with that question, I am wondering if that is in regards to the summative assessment. Yes, it will be adaptive. For interim, as of this year, no. Will interim scores be uploaded to data tools? Now, that would be a question we will have to discuss with our supervisor, with Travis, in regards to that. But my assumption would be no, but don't quote me on that, because I don't know what the future is going to look with the interim scores. So just double checking, every student needs a set of headphones when testing. For ELA, yes, because there is an audio piece component for ELA that students will need headsets to be used during the state test, and that's for ELA only. Just also keep in mind, if you have not already done so, please turn in your needs, so your extra testing needs, so that will be your mice, your headphones, and any other type of technological equipment that you might need. So for instance, if you need more power cables, if you need, some schools are needing hubs. ITSC, working with tech services, they are going to be bringing in temporary wire access points so that you can be able to use wireless for students for testing if you're using cows. So please make sure that you send those testing needs in to me, gathering all that information, and between ITSC and tech services, they're working with the technicians so that they can be able to have that out for schools, so they can be able to have a good and smooth test administration. So I see that was the last question as of right now. So I have one more poll that I would like for everyone to hopefully answer. And so basically just want to kind of get a feel as to how do you feel about the Smart Balanced State test? Are you good with it? Not so good? Not sure? So if you can just take a minute to kind of put in as to what your feelings are, it'd be much appreciated. All right, we got some good turnouts, so we're going to share what everyone felt. So it seems like we're kind of above the meter there, that people are feeling pretty good. Good job for those who feel really great about the Smart Balance test. That's pretty awesome. And so we did get a few more questions. And so one other question that came through was that the different types of PTs. And just want to clarify that the CAT, within the CAT, it will be the non-performance task that is adaptive, but the PT isn't. So in that regard to asking, not all students take the same test or do the same task, true, they may receive the same questions for that, but we would have to double check on that. I don't want to put out there like, hey, this is what it is, and then find out it isn't. So let me get back to you on that one if you don't mind. And in regards to the TIDE access codes, everyone should have received their TIDE information, login information. The for the sender would be MAAC. And so if you feel that you did not get that, or just make sure you checked your trash mail, that if you got that or not, just let me know and then we'll get you guys going. What you can do is you can actually go into the WCAP or the WeCap to see whether, to the TIDE, and then do a reset password. And then it can actually, if it doesn't let you in, that means you may not be in a system, but just try that and just reset your password. You type in your district email and then it will send you a reset password. So I think as of right now, we've received a good amount of questions. So I just wanted to let you know to thank you for all that you do, knowing that within this field that sometimes it can get a little strenuous, but we just want to take the time to thank you for working with students and working as hard as you do. You may not hear it often, but we do appreciate you, and just let us know how we can be able to help you. And so at this time, this is the end of our presentation. So we're going to leave this open for a few more minutes and see if there's any questions out there. And we'll have the responses to your questions up on our department webpage. And if there are no more questions, then we hope that you have a good night and just let us know how we can help. Have a good one. Take care.